Yo.
What up, though?
I got to talk. I got to tell what I feel. I got to talk about my life as I see it.
All right, then. It's time for you to bring it to the table.
Turn up your radio wherever you at. We about to bring it.
Street Beat.
Yeah.
With Tony B.
For the next hour, Tony B will give you a chance to tackle local, national, and international issues that affect your community.
Street Beat.
Street Beat with
Tony B.
Welcome to this edition of Street Beat. It is me, your host, Tony B, and I am super excited. I am going to talk to some incredible musicians who together form jazz, funk, soul, Mr. Everette Harp, Paul Jackson Jr., and Jeff Lorber. They'll be performing at Jazz Alley. Jazz Alley, 44 years of Jazz Alley. And folks, they're arguably one of the best venues in the country to hear jazz music. They'll be here July 17th through the 20th. Really looking forward to the opportunity. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Bellis, to talk to these gentlemen. Jazz, funk, soul is the name of the group, and I would like to bring them in right now. I know I've got Mr. Harp, and I know I've got Mr. Jackson Jr. I'm not sure if Mr. Lorber is with us, but I got 2 out of 3, and that ain't bad.
That's not bad. That's pretty fair for a square, I got to tell you.
Well, awesome. Well, first of all, hello, gentlemen. I'll just start individually so we can hear from you. Everett, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's good to be here with you.
Awesome. And Paul, how are you doing, sir?
Well, not to coin a cliche, but I am blessed in the Lord and highly favored, and I'm doing okay today.
Good. And you know, I just start that off, as you know, because we're living in, and I guess we've always lived in some different times. And, you know, one of the things that has been consistent through most experiences, the definition of music and saying this is where we're at, or this is how we feel, or this is how we want to take a break.
Yeah, right. Yep.
From things that are going on. Well, welcome, and good to have you here. Let's start off. It's 80, I think 82 degrees now in Seattle. We are having summer.
I'm looking forward to getting there because it's 110 here.
Oh no.
Oh yeah.
Oh no.
You know, guys, I wish I could feel your pain, but I live about 3 miles from the beach, 3-4 miles from the beach, and we get a breeze in the neighborhood, and it's probably about 65 degrees right now. So, you know, I feel your pain, but it's hard for me to feel bad for you right now. I'm sorry.
Somehow I don't think you're sorry, Paul. But
you don't think I'm sorry?
No,
I
don't look sorry.
I bring up the weather in Seattle just a little bit to talk about Seattle, and I know that you are probably both familiar with Seattle's iconic history in jazz in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. Seattle was a hub for jazz, and everybody who was anybody came to Seattle. And how do you feel coming back to Seattle? What do you think of Seattle? What is your impression of Seattle and just the city? And then again, the music community here. Everett, I'll start with you, I guess.
I know a handful of musicians there. I have one good friend of mine that lives there. His name is Jeff Koshua. He's a wonderful sax player. And there's a singer there named Darrell Holden that I used to perform with when I lived in LA or in the early years quite often. I'm not as much familiar with the music scene there, but Jeff would have had more to say on that if he were if he were here. I'm assuming he's going to join us on the video in a little bit.
Okay. And Paul, for you, you came to Seattle. You've been here a few times, but once you were here, and I had the pleasure of interviewing members of your band who came
Yeah.
down to our studio, and that was a great opportunity to talk to them. And of course, they spoke very highly of you. And but for you, I mean, you're back again, Seattle. What do you think about Seattle? And we obviously love you when you come here every time. What are your thoughts on Seattle?
Well, I absolutely love Seattle. I've actually been coming there since let me move this mic stand in the way. I'm trying to get on the camera. There it goes. All right. Now I'm feeling good. Okay. I have a lot of family in Seattle. I've actually been coming to Seattle since I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Oh, wow. Really?
Oh, yeah. My grandmother, my aunt, I still have cousins there. And so it's another place that I call family, another place that I call home. And just playing up there is always a joy, getting a chance to get up there, because for me, it's like being on the road, but not really being on the road, because you're only an hour from home, and like I said, I get to see my cousins, see my family. I got some junior high school buddies that live up there. So
wow,
I love coming to Seattle.
Wow. Well, I did not know that, and I feel like I should have known that. In the words of Biggie Smalls, if you don't know now, you know.
You're not gonna finish that, are you?
I'll tell you this much, Tony. When I in the early days when I used to tour with pop and R&B acts, I used to come to Seattle quite often, and I was there a lot with Kenny Loggins. I was there quite a bit. Jeff Lorber's calling me now. I guess he's trying to figure out how to get on it on the call.
Well, I'll tell you what. Why don't you take that call and we'll get him on, and I'll talk to Paul.
Give me just 1 second.
Okay, Paul.
Yes, sir.
When did you? Then I know this is information and questions that you may have asked before, but we'll just start with this. When did you first become interested in the guitar? Was that a Seattle thing when you were here, or did that start a little bit later?
Well, actually it started a little later. I grew up in Los Angeles, and when I was about 9 years old, I had taken piano lessons, and I wanted to play drums. So I'll never forget, on Redondo Beach Boulevard, just a little bit west of Vermont, in Gardena, California, there was a music store called Gardena Valley Music. And in the window, there was a set of blue metal flake drums. And my mom took me down there, and the drums were $369. And my mother said, this is not going to happen. No way, no how. So we went in the store, and she said, is there anything else in here that looks interesting? And there was a $20 guitar in there. So I got the guitar, and I didn't really play it a lot until I was 12, but then I started really studying, and so early on, and then played in my family band, played at high school, played with friends, played with older guys, played just as much as I could play. And so, Lord blessed. And it didn't hurt that my mentor and still friend, in fact, I talked to her today, lived down the street, none other than the great Patrice Rushen. And it's funny because we actually used to walk to school together. So that's another story for another day. But she took me under her wing and really got me going with the help of her and a lot of other folks. So, but it's kind of started when I was really got my first guitar when I was 9, and it really started when I was about 12.
You know what? And you bring up Patrice Rushen, and that segues into a question that I was going to ask you, because I wanted to talk about the mentorship of her and Ray Parker Jr. and how that shaped you and your tone. And tell me a little bit about that, growing up under that type of mentorship.
Well, and I found this out much later, but I decided that I was actually going into electrical engineering. And I decided one day, I came home and told my mom, I said, I think I really want to make a go of this music thing. And she said, well, I don't know a lot about it, but why don't you go down the street and talk to Patrice? And so Patrice, gave me a Kenny Burrell record and told me to start checking out Earl Clue and different things. And I would go hear her play and practice. And then she actually hired me to join her band after I graduated from high school. And so we were doing some things, and I found out that my mom called her on the phone. And she said, Patrice? And Patrice was like, yes, ma'am. It says, make sure you take care of Paul. And she said, yes, Miss Jackson, I will. And that started a lifelong friendship and it's funny because I just finished an 8-year professorship at the University of Southern California. And I was hired to come over there by another. Yeah. and I was hired to come over there by none other than Dr. Professor Patrice Rushen. So,
Wow.
so she is like I said, lifelong friend, lifelong mentor, and I love her dearly. Like I said, we spoke today. We speak at least about once a week. You know, I told her, because I used to see her at school all the time, and I said, well, you know, now that we're not USC, I'm suffering from separation anxiety. So, so we talk all the time. And then Ray Parker Jr. I met Ray Parker Jr. from a buddy of mine who I was going to church with by the name of Ollie Brown, drummer, played with Stevie Wonder, played with the Rolling Stones, did There's No Stopping Us from the Breaking soundtrack. And Ray, same thing, took me under his wing. And one of the things I found out later is I would show up on different sessions, and I didn't know how I got there. I just get called. And I found out from Ray, Ray had been doing sessions, and he kind of got out so he could, concentrate on his solo career. And what Ray said, he said, I would get one call. I would get two calls. I would send Charles Fearing on one. Charles Fearing was a great guitar player who was in radio. I'd send Charles on one, and I'd send you on the other. And that's another way that I got really started doing sessions. With Ray would get a call, and he'd say, I can't do it, or I'm not going to do it. Call this kid Paul Jackson Jr. So I had a lot of help from a lot of people.
And this conversation is taking no particular direction. It's going all over the place. I'm just going to give you a shout out.
Well, that's guaranteed.
Paul, my daughter just graduated from USC in the spring of 2025. So,
nice. Well, tell her I said fight on.
And that was, for me, that was the most ostentatious graduation I'd ever seen in my life. USC does it big.
Yeah, they do.
Everette, what do you think? How do you they're jazz, funk, soul. That's who I'm talking to right now. Let me go back to that. Jeff Lorber, Everette Harp, Paul Jackson Jr., jazz, funk, soul, going to be in here in Seattle on the 17th of July, all the way to the 20th.
I guess you're talking to soul funk. Jazz. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
And yes, I want to make sure at Demetrius Jazz Alley, 2 shows, Friday and Saturday. So go ahead and get your tickets now. You don't want to miss this. But Everette, this is not the original band. Paul Jackson Jr., who I was just talking to, was added. And can you tell me how that worked? Because I was going to ask Paul this question, but I'm just going to ask you because Paul, and I'm sure you're like the first choice of guitar when everybody wants somebody to go in the studio and have them play guitar. How was Paul chosen, selected? How did that happen to keep jazz, funk, soul and what it was? How did that take place?
Well, it wasn't as much of a chosen or selection. It was basically when we started the group. It started with Chuck Loeb, who was a wonderful guitarist, and Jeff and myself.
Paul put Everette. There we go.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was just making sure. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It was started with Chuck Loeb, who was a wonderful guitarist, with Jeff Lorber and myself as basically a touring group, and it was just for us to get out and play each other's music together. And within a month or so of the word getting out that we were doing this, we were offered a record deal by the company that Chuck and I, and even later Jeff, were already record company that we were already with. We did 2 records, and right around the second record, Chuck acquired colon cancer, and he eventually succumbed to that disease. But while Chuck, at times, he worked while he was receiving treatment, and when he couldn't, and he was also with a group called another group, a fledgling group called Foreplay. And no, not fledgling at all. We were actually fledgling group in comparison. But Paul would come in and work with us whenever we needed someone to fill in for Chuck, and whether he was sick or whether he had a conflict. And when Chuck eventually passed, Jeff and I just kind of batted back and forth if we wanted to continue, because it was definitely an emotional hit that we took when he passed. But after a few months, we asked Paul if he would consider continuing with this, and he agreed to.
And
we're very fortunate to have that.
and for you, Paul, to become part of this this trio, again, highly in demand. You know, I want to talk about that. Your style, your tone. What is it about your playing that separates you, that makes you unique and of interest in that way? How would you describe it, and where did that come from?
I consider myself to be the eternal student. And so I think if it comes from anywhere, it comes from a desire to always be better, to play more in tune, to play cleaner, to play faster, and to play with more, I would call, important information. Mm-hmm. You know, you can spitfire a lot of information out of any instrument, but if it's not saying anything and it's not pertinent and it's not pleasing, then sometimes it can be pointless. So if anything, I think my sound or my approach just comes from a desire to always be better. And, you know, we were at rehearsal today, and I've been experimenting with some new equipment, some new gear, and some new combinations of gear. And I came home and told my wife, she said, how was rehearsal? I said, it went great. The band sounded great and everything was good. And I said, and the guitar sounded great. So what I'm doing is working. So if anything, it's just, it's a desire to always be better and sound better and be cleaner. And so that's really how I would, what is the impetus for my sound, really.
And you know, I'm taking my time with this, and so Paul, and I want to segue back into you, Everett. So Paul, when you had the opportunity to join Jazz Funk Soul, what went into that for you? What was your thought process? And then for both of you, what became the creative process at that point of combining all of these various different styles? Although you had a trio before that was touring, and so now you've got Paul in there, Everett, and the creative process and combining all these. How did that work? But first, Paul, what was your decision in saying, hey, this is something I want to be part of?
Well, the first thing I did was, you know, my wife and I prayed about it, and, you know, took a little time and, you know, thinking in you know, in deference to the memory of Chuck. And Chuck was a good friend of mine. In fact, we had a group together, myself, Chuck, and Kelly Minucci, called Guitars. And we used to go around doing guitar trio things. And so I knew Chuck very well. So, you know, thinking about that and also thinking, you know, I'm a different player than Chuck is. My approach is different. My sound is different. You know, so thinking, well, how is this going to work? But then I had to think about the fact that, number one, I've been working pretty steadily with Jeff for a number of years on his projects, on my projects, on, you know, different things, on remixes, on tons of things. And then I worked a lot with Everett, with George Duke, late great George Duke. We both were mentored by him and worked with George. And so neither guy was a stranger. And also I felt like it was a situation where I could learn a lot from both of them, because both of them have an amazing amount of great information and great sound. And I tell Everett this all the time. Well, not all the time, maybe not enough actually, is that I don't care how much information you have if you sound like crap. And the thing that I love about Everett is his sound is great. Mm-hmm. So it's like when he plays, it's like, okay, that's what a saxophone's supposed to sound like, notwithstanding the information that's coming out is amazing as well. And I can say the same thing about Jeff, you know, listening to Jeff and, you know, and learning from Jeff and learning from both of them. So I also, like I said, you know, because I consider myself the eternal student, I said, this is not just a place where I can give, but I can receive, you know, a lot musically. So, and, you know, like I said, we get along great. So it ended up being like a really, really, you know, good.
All right, wrap it up, Paul. Wrap it up.
All right. Did that cover the $50 I owe you? We're good now, right? That was good for the 50, right?
Yeah. Talk about that, Everett. You know, you had Chuck, and now you've got. What about how did that work into, say, okay, the creative process and what this was going to look like and what this was going to sound like, because you have a different guitar player now.
Well, I mean, yeah, the direction in some ways definitely took a turn, because Paul brings a different strength. Chuck was strong in his own way. I mean, Chuck was a wonderful straight ahead player, and was very prolific in that way. Paul is a wonderful all around guitar player. One of his huge strengths is his rhythm guitar playing. So he adds to the songs that we do now in a different way than what Chuck would. Because rhythm guitar, while most guitar players can play rhythm guitar, it's not a strength like it is for Paul Jackson Jr. And in that case, that was fairly reasonable to say. With Chuck was just a wonderful all-around guitar player, a wonderful, even greater, an incredible soloist. But the rhythm guitar is not going to be like what Paul Jackson can do, and vice versa. Some of the type of playing that Chuck does, the style of playing that Chuck does, Paul isn't going to come in and try to mimic, because that's not where he lives. But Paul solos in a different way, and like Paul says, he's the eternal student. You can always hear see Paul listening and learning, and you hear it come out every time he plays. And how we incorporated that into what we do as a band, recording wise. Well, what better talent to have than one of the world's greatest rhythm players on all of your songs for free?
And you know what, Everett, I'm gonna get in your Kool-Aid a little bit here, but first I want to ask you to kind of define, for those who may be unfamiliar, saying rhythm guitar. What does that mean, rhythm guitar?
Well, it's the accompanying guitar, and Paul's gonna probably chime in, but it's the accompanying guitar in the section that you hear in the background. Anything that's not considered solo, in my mind, would be part of and if the guitar player is playing within the rhythm section, that's rhythm guitar. And if he steps out and does a solo, that's lead guitar or solo guitar, whether it's in a rock field or any genre. But the rhythm guitar generally plays in the section.
Now, Everett, you got started early. I was asking Paul about that, and he said, "But what? 2 years old, 4 years old? Is that when you became?"
Well, I started playing the sax when I was 4. Everyone, yeah, but all the kids in my family, there were 7 of us. We all played piano, and I started taking piano at 2.
At 2?
Yeah.
Wow.
And my mother was a piano player and organist, church pianist and organist. So then they told me I asked for a saxophone at the age of 4, and fell in love with it, and it's just been part of my anatomy ever since.
And my understanding is that there was a switch that you had to make for secular music, and
what?
Secular music, and how did you navigate, bringing jazz into your life?
Well, I mean, there really wasn't much of a switch. Once I heard, and my parents, my father was a minister, as probably what you're alluding to, and but before he was a minister, he was always a deacon. We were always in church, and we had a family choir, so we stood out in the church as far as the family that, with the entirety, could sing, and in their gospel collection of records, LPs, I found somewhere around the age of 6 or 7, I found 2 jazz records. One was John Coltrane's Soul Train, and the other was Dave Brubeck's Take 5. And I listened to those records repeatedly and started learning some of the things, like the melodies and stuff off of the record. I was self-taught on the saxophone, so I just taught myself all of those things. I was self-taught at the time. Of course, I went on and got through school and grade school and learned from people there. But once I fell in love with jazz and then got into it in middle school, and then I went to a performing arts high school, and then I went to a music college, North Texas State, for music and business accounting. There was never really any other music for me. And the only conflict was, there was really no conflict, but my father would have preferred that I not play jazz at the early time when I was finishing college and started playing jazz or playing around town. It wasn't his preferred thing for me to do. But once he saw that I wasn't going to fall into the failings that at that time were stereotyped to go with playing jazz or playing being a live musician in the secular world. Once he realized that I was safe from that, and I just basically told him, trust what you did. You did a good job. Trust yourself. And after years of my doing it, he did begin to trust himself. And of course, once I moved out to LA and started having reasonable success, he couldn't have been more proud.
My guest again, Everette Harp, Paul Jackson Jr., 2/3 of Jazz Funk Soul. Jeff Lorber isn't with us, and Everette.
Well, he's trying. I see him in the chat window trying to get in. I have no idea what's going on.
And Jeff is very special to us up here in the Pacific Northwest. Jeff Lorber.
And if he was here, he'd say you guys are very, very, very special to him too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, let's Everette, I'll start with you because I want to talk about Jeff a little bit too. Again, we know Jeff here, and one of the things up here, I used to work at a little record store called Music Menu, and we couldn't wait for the Jeff Lorber Fusion album to come out because of the creativity and the way that he utilized the keyboard. So talk about keyboard player Jeff Lorber and what he brings to Jazz Funk Soul.
Well, Jeff brings a lot of energy, a lot of energy. And Jeff being the oldest member of the band, sometimes I just sit back and wonder where it comes from. It's just endless when he starts playing. Sometimes the fire that comes out of him, it's like, wow, dude, slow down. Look, Paul and I have been around, Paul's been around a little longer than me, and I'm a bit longer than me, and I've been around for a long time, but I can tell you now that I was in college or maybe, finishing high school when I first heard of Jeff Lorber. So, to be playing with him is kind of surreal, to a degree. Now, I've been doing it for quite some time, so it's not as much as surreal as it is frustrating. No, it's surreal. But he brings that Jeff Lorber thing that put it this way, it just takes you back every time he plays. It just takes you back to the first time you heard him, and it's like, wow, yeah. And like I said, we've been together for a while now, so you get over the fascination of, wow, it's Jeff Lorber. He just brings the musicality, the stuff that he writes for our records, easily recognizable Jeff Lorber. That's the one different thing about what we do as far as writing the records. We each do 3 songs and then maybe collaborate on the 10th song, or if one of us have a 10th song, we'll do that person will do the 10th song. Well, people often ask, how is it that we come up with these records? What's our method of doing this? And basically, and how do we get the jazz funk sound, jazz funk soul sound? And basically, each of our writings are going to be very similar to what we would do in our solo efforts. Our style is our style. If we collaborate on tunes, that's different because it'll encompass those who are writing their styles. But if it's my songs and Jeff's playing on them and Paul's playing on them, or if it's Paul's song and Jeff and I are playing on them and Jeff and Paul and I are playing on them, the thing that makes it jazz funk soul is that you'll hear all of our different ingredients coming in on that one song converging, and you'll never hear those 3 ingredients anyplace else together at one time except on Jazz Funk Soul records.
Wow. Do we have Jeff there?
There he is. The last couple of minutes.
Jeff, Jeff, are you there?
Is that working now?
Hey, there it is. It's working.
Well,
yeah.
Well, Jeff, we only have a couple minutes, but I saw that you might be there, man, and I just had to bring you in. And first of all, I don't know if you remember a record store years and years and years ago called Music Menu in Seattle. But, man, we loved your music, and every time you got a new album out, the Jeff Lorber Fusion, folks would come in and come to Music Menu back in that day and pick up the new Jeff Lorber Fusion. And good to actually have an opportunity to talk to you.
I'm glad I tried it. I have a lot of devices here. I've tried every device, and I finally got something to work over here. So I'm glad I finally got in.
Let's talk really quickly about your work with jazz, funk, soul, and combining your unique talents with the unique talents of Paul Jackson Jr. and the unique talents of Everette Harp, and how that works. Everett just told us a little bit about how the process of recording. For you, how does that process work for you from your perspective when you're saying we're about to go into a jazz, funk, soul recording?
Well, the interesting thing for me is that I'm sorry, I hear this echo. I'll try to ignore it. Anyway, the interesting thing for me is that I've always been the leader of my own group, and this is the first group I've been in, with two other people, and I get to share the responsibility of making a record and being in a group, and that makes it so much fun because it's easier. You don't have to take all the responsibility. We all share the responsibility. We all have different talents and different things that we do, and it's just I mean it creates some issues occasionally, but it's definitely less work than trying to do it all by yourself. And so that and also it's been just really a great thing as far as live goes. It's the having more people, more brains involved, and I think our talents are very complementary. The way we play together on stage, we each give something very unique, and that works really well together when we play together.
What does it feel like for you to come back here to the Northwest? Again, I'm familiar with your history here, but for you coming back to Seattle and playing at Jazz Alley, what is that like for you?
Well, it's fantastic because I started my group in Portland. We were just a local band, and we would drive to Missoula, Montana, and to Vancouver, BC, and Seattle was like the big city. That was when we got to finally play in Seattle. We were, to some extent, you've kind of made it at least a little bit compared to just playing in Portland and playing in all these other small towns around. And Seattle's always it's always been a great music town and a great jazz town. There was this club called Parnell's that we used to play at, and a place called the Bombay Bicycle Shop.
Mhm.
And it was just always really great to drive up the freeway and play there. And I have like a lot of great memories. I used to always come up to Seattle to see Joe Henderson play at Parnell's every chance I could. So because we got started in the '70s, and even actually there was a time where we had a sax player from Seattle, a guy named Denny Goodhue, that was part of our band, and Kenny G, of course, is from Seattle.
Yeah. Yes. We are not only out of time, we're a little over time. Our next show, Jazz in the Cabinets, which is following this show, so I'm sure that they won't mind. But I do want to ask each of you the opportunity to talk a little bit about what we can expect to see on stage. And this is a quintet, so there's a drummer and a bass player that are playing with y'all up there too. And Paul, I'll just start with you. If you want to share whatever you'd like to share about what folks are going to see and what they're going to feel and what they're going to hear in Seattle at Jazz Alley, July 17th through the 20th. 2 shows on Friday and Saturday. I'm so excited about seeing y'all perform. I can't wait for it. But Paul, we'll start with you. What would you like to share with our audience now about what they can expect to see? Jazz, funk, soul, Paul Jackson Jr., Everette Harp, and Jeff Lorber together.
Well, I'm going to keep it brief. We're going to bring the heat. That's what we're going to bring. It's going to be hot in that piece. I'm just saying. You're going to hear a lot of good notes and a lot of good grooves and a lot of great music. So that's what it's going to be.
Thank you, Paul, and Everett. Same question, man. Thank you for this conversation and for sharing information, folks. And then again, like I said, man, you got a bassist and
yeah, we have bassists that grew up with Paul Jackson Jr., Cornelius Mims, who's a wonderful bassist and I believe an artist in his own right, as well as one of my oldest and dearest friends who's just joining us this coming week to play with us for his first time ever, Michael White, who's a wonderful, wonderful drummer. He's been around for a very long time, played on many records, and spent many years with Frankie Beverly and Mays, and played with George Duke and Stanley Clarke and so many others. But we're going to be, like Paul said, we're going to bring the heat. I mean, what we do live is is an extension of what we do on the records, and that's basically we do not shy away from playing. We won't, if you're a smooth jazz lover, which we do ascribe to, we do play songs in that vein, but we stretch our material because we love to play, we love to improvise, we love to play jazz, we love to improvise. And you won't see any dancing around, although Paul does do some dances occasionally, wiggles. And you won't hear any covers, any Gap band or anything like that. We play our music and we play jazz, and that's what we do, and we hope people like it. That's the one difference for us than a lot of other acts out there right now, because we know that this genre is basically an extension of instrumental R&B music, but we like to try to keep a huge amount of the jazz element in it, as far as we're concerned, because we're old school. We came up with that music, that contemporary jazz of the 70s and 80s, and we would not like to see it disappear.
And Jeff, same question for you again. Thanks for joining us. I'm glad you got on. And again, I'm going to give you a shout out for all that you brought to us in those early years. And just want you to share from your perspective what the audience is going to hear, what they can expect from jazz, funk, soul, yourself, Everette Harp, and Paul Jackson Jr. on stage at Jazz Alley, July 17th through the 20th.
Yeah, I think that I think we definitely do something different than other bands do. We bring more of the bebop part of jazz, I think, into what we do, in addition to the funk and the soul and some Latin vibes, and it kind of goes all over the place musically. And Paul is definitely one of the finest rhythm guitar players on the planet, and he can solo. Everybody loves to solo and loves to back each other up, and we just have a lot of fun interacting and getting into our music, our new music. We play some of our old stuff, some of the stuff that there's some songs that Chuck Loeb was involved in that we still love to do, and I think people really have fun, really, and we're gonna really have fun too, because we love Seattle. It's one of the great cities, and we love to come there.
Really quick question for you, Jeff. I gotta ask, what was it like for you the first time to hear your music sampled? I remember going, wait a minute, I know that track. That's Jeff Lorber music.
Well, actually, I think the one that most people know is Notorious Big and Little Kim, and then there was sort of a landslide of quite a few after that. But that was like the biggest one that a lot of people really noticed. Crush on You. Uh-huh. And I found out about it just from listening to it. I was listening to the radio in my car. I was kind of switching around stations, and I heard something, and it's like, hey, that sounds like me. And I almost got into a car accident. I was so distracted from driving. Luckily, I pulled over and tried to figure out what was happening. But the thing that's cool about it, it's just really nice to find out that your music is still relevant to a younger generation. So that's the good thing about it.
Well, Lau, this time went by so quickly. Thank
you.
Hey,
Tony, real quick, can I let you know that we do have a new record that is coming out, and it's called Simpatico. It'll be out within the next week or so. The single is out now, and the single is called, guys, Over Easy.
Over Easy.
Yeah, and it's a fun song that we play that. Well, if you want to dance, it's definitely one that you can get up and shake your booty to. It's a fun song that Paul and Jeff wrote, and
it's a toe tapper.
A toe tapper. The crowd will enjoy it.
I was listening to that before I got in here, and I certainly meant to bring that. Man, we had so much to talk about, and but yes, Simpatico, Over Easy. Man, I
this means we have to do it again. That's all.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to tell Daniel to cue that up too, so we could hear a little bit about. Anyway, I'm overtime, like 9 minutes. It's just been a blast talking to y'all.
Thank you so much.
Man, coming up next is Jazz in the Cabinets with Big Poppy. So for those of you who've tuned in and like, okay, well, you got your jazz fix from three of the best. Again, July 17th through the 20th at Jazz Alley, Jazz, Funk, Soul, Everette Harp, Jeff Lorber. Yes. our Jeff Lorber. Jeff, we're claiming you, man. And and also Paul Jackson Jr., who's had his group stop by here before and allowed them to have the opportunity to interview us and get to know them. Just three outstanding gentlemen. Thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing you on the 17th. I know I'll be there.
Thank you.
Good.
I'll be there.
Much appreciated.
That's it. That's all the time that I have. That is going to do it for the kid. It's me, Tony B. Thanks for listening to this edition of Street Beat. What do you believe you can? I'm out. Peace.